My husband permitted his mother to move into our home. Now she's striving to supplant me as his wife. Have you ever had that sickening feeling? The one where you look at the person you built your entire life with, the one you trusted with everything, and suddenly realize they've chosen someone else over you? Because that's exactly what happened when my mother-in-law moved in. It was like watching my marriage unravel, thread by agonizing thread, and my husband just stood there, letting it all burn. What the hell happened next? Well, let me tell you. My husband and I, we were college sweethearts. 11 years we'd been married, and honestly, we built our whole life from the ground up, brick by emotional brick. I mean, I worked double shifts as a waitress, hustling endlessly, just so he could finish law school. And when he finally passed the bar, I remember crying my eyes out, not just from relief, but from pure joy. We thought, finally, we can breathe, we made it. 4 years ago, we bought our dream home. Every single penny of the down payment came from my inheritance, everything my late father left me. I poured all of it into that house because I trusted my husband completely. I thought we were a team, an unbreakable force. But then, 8 months ago, everything shattered. My mother-in-law called my husband, literally sobbing, claiming she couldn't afford her rent anymore. And without even a single conversation with me, my husband just told her she could move in. I found out when she showed up on our doorstep unannounced with 6 enormous suitcases. A total gut punch. Now, she'd never really liked me. Not from day one, not since I started dating her son. There were always those snide comments, those little digs about how I wasn't good enough, how he could do better. I'd always swallowed it, always kept the peace, just for his sake. But this felt different. This felt like an invasion. When she first moved in, I tried to be optimistic. I told myself, okay, it's temporary. Just for a little while. Oh, how wrong I was. The first week, she didn't just unpack, she completely took over. She rearranged my entire kitchen. My kitchen. And then she threw out my spices, my beautiful, vibrant, too ethnic spices, and replaced them with her own bland ones. When I finally confronted her, trying to keep my voice calm, telling her I didn't appreciate it, she just gave me this dismissive look and said she was just trying to help since I clearly didn't know how to keep a proper home. I looked at my husband, expecting something. His response? A sigh and just let it go. The second week, the passive aggression escalated. She started cooking all of my husband's meals. Every night, I'd walk in from work, exhausted, to find dinner already made, the table set for 2. Just her and her son. When I'd appear, she'd look up, feigning surprise, and say, "Oh, I didn't realize you'd be eating here. I only made enough for me and my son." It was like she was erasing me from my own kitchen, my own home. Again, I went to my husband, feeling tears well up. His advice? Just let it go. By the 3rd week, it was like a twisted game. She started doing his laundry. Only his. She'd meticulously fold his clothes, put them away in our shared dresser, but leave my wet laundry festering in the washing machine until it smelled. Until it was ruined. When I finally snapped and confronted her, demanding to know what she was doing, she just shrugged. "Oh, honey, I only have enough energy to take care of my son." I couldn't believe it. I turned to my husband, a plea in my eyes. His reaction? A quiet, "just let it go." That phrase became the soundtrack to my nightmare. 2 months in, and she had completely taken over. It wasn't just the kitchen or the laundry anymore. She was answering our door, picking up our phone, and confidently telling visitors that she was the woman of the house. To our neighbors, she'd refer to me as the girl who also lives here. The disrespect was suffocating. Everything I did was wrong. Vacuum before noon? I was disrupting her precious sleep. Watch TV after 9 p.m.? Disrespectful. God forbid I made plans with my own husband. Suddenly, she'd have a migraine or feel faint, needing him to stay home and cater to her. I tried talking to my husband. Dozens of times. Every single conversation ended the same way. He'd just sigh, tell me his mother was old, she was lonely, she just needed him right now. He'd ask why I couldn't just be patient. Why I always had to start problems. My heart sank every time. It was like he couldn't see what was happening, or worse, he refused to see it. Then, last month, the final straw. I came home early with a brutal migraine, just needing peace. I opened my bedroom door, my sanctuary, and there she was. My mother-in-law, lounging in my bed, on my side, watching my TV. My blood ran cold. I asked her, my voice barely a whisper, "What are you doing in my room?" She just waved a hand. "Oh, my bedroom doesn't get good light. I'll be using this room during the day now. You're never home anyway." The sheer audacity. I marched straight to my husband, absolutely furious, but with a tiny spark of hope that this time, he would finally see it. Finally take my side. He just shrugged. "She's not hurting anything," he said. "Why do you always make everything into a fight?" That was it. Something inside me didn't just crack, it shattered. Beyond repair. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. I looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Whose house is this?" He mumbled, "Our house." I pushed back, "Whose money paid for it?" He went quiet. Completely silent. Then I asked, "Whose name is on the deed?" His face drained of color. The defensiveness vanished. And that's when I told him, "I want your mother out by the end of the month." He exploded. Called me heartless. Said I was forcing him to choose between his wife and his mother. My voice was steady. "This is my house. My father's money paid for it." He got angry, truly angry then, and spat, "If my mother goes, I go." I just looked at him. 11 years. 11 years I gave this man. My whole life. And this is who he was. I walked back to my bedroom, where his mother was still sprawled out, oblivious. I looked at her, then calmly said, "You have 30 days to leave." She laughed. Just outright laughed in my face, then shrieked for my husband, "Your wife has lost her mind." He came running, of course, and stood right next to her, a united front. They stared at me like I was the insane one. "Both of you," I said, my voice shaking but firm, 30 days. My husband grabbed my arm. "If I do this, our marriage is over." I pulled away. Our marriage, I told him, was already over the moment you let another woman replace me. His mother's smug smirk vanished. I walked to my closet and started pulling out suitcases. He followed, frantic. "What are you doing?" "I'm not staying," I told him, "where I'm treated like a stranger in my own home." He started to panic then, rambling, telling me to calm down, that we could talk this through. But then, she appeared in the doorway, my mother-in-law, a venomous smile on her face. "Let her go," she purred. "She was never right for you anyway." I froze. I stopped packing, turned around slowly, and looked at my husband. This was it. The moment of truth. What would he do? What would he say? And what he did next, or rather, didn't do, made me realize I never knew him at all. He just stood there. Mouth open, eyes wide, paralyzed. His mother waited, her gaze fixed on him, expecting him to defend her. The silence in that room stretched, thick and suffocating, so long I could hear the damn clock ticking in the hallway. His mother's face began to flush crimson. She grabbed his arm. And he still didn't speak. I turned back to my closet, my hands shaking uncontrollably, but I forced myself to keep moving, to keep pulling clothes, to keep packing. Because if I stopped, even for a second, I knew I would shatter. His mother made a disgusted sound. "You better say something," she hissed at him, "before she actually leaves." He finally moved. Reached out, put his hand on my arm to stop me. I recoiled, jerking away like he'd burned me. "Don't touch me," I snarled, the words raw. I meant what I said. He stumbled back, and for the very first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine fear flash across his face. His mother, still in the doorway, watched us like it was a private performance, thoroughly enjoying the show. I walked right past both of them, not even glancing at their faces, and went straight to the guest room at the end of the hall. I slammed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, just breathing. Deep, shaky breaths. My mind was racing, but a new kind of clarity had settled in. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts. My gaze landed on a name, the real estate lawyer I used to wait on at the restaurant, the one who always seemed so kind. Before I could second-guess myself, before fear could creep back in, I hit call. She answered on the third ring, a cacophony of kids yelling in the background. I blurted out my name. Hi, it's protagonist's name, from the restaurant. Do you remember me? She said, of course I do. What's going on? I tried to explain everything, all 8 months of torment, as fast as I possibly could. My voice kept breaking, hot tears pricking my eyes, but I pushed through it. She listened silently for a long minute. Then she said, hold on a second, and went somewhere quieter. When she came back, her voice was warm. She said, I remember you. You always gave me free refills and extra fries when my cases were going badly. Honestly, right then, in that moment of utter brokenness, I almost started sobbing with gratitude. She cut to the chase. Is your name on the deed? Yes, I said, along with my husband's. And the down payment? She asked. My inheritance, I told her, from my dad. She made this thoughtful sound, a little and then said, that gives you a lot of power here. She explained that my inheritance meant I had a bigger stake in the house, legally, than he did, even with both our names on the deed. She said I absolutely had the legal right to decide who lived in my home. Can you make it official? I pleaded. Can you send an eviction notice? Absolutely, she said. It'll hold up in court. I must have thanked her 5 times. She just told me, hang in there. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at my phone, my hand hovering over Maya's name. My best friend. I needed to call her, but a wave of shame washed over me. I'd been so good at pretending. Maya had asked months ago if everything was okay after I kept canceling plans. I'd lied, said work was just crazy. She was going to be furious that I hadn't told her the truth, that I'd let things get this bad. I tapped her name before I could chicken out. She answered instantly, what's up? You never call anymore. And once I started talking, I couldn't stop. It all just poured out of me. The kitchen, the meals for 2, the ruined laundry, her in my bed. Every single agonizing detail. Maya kept interrupting with, oh my God, and are you serious? And I'm going to kill him. When I got to the part about tonight, about the lawyer and the eviction notice, her voice changed completely. It was sharp, resolute. I'm coming over right now, she said. You shouldn't be alone. I tried to protest, it's late, Maya, but she just snapped, I don't care. And she hung up before I could argue. Just as I was trying to process it all, I heard footsteps in the hallway, then a tentative knock on the guest room door. My husband's voice muffled, can we please talk about this? I stayed put, glued to the bed. We can talk, I said through the door, my voice flat, after you tell your mother to start packing. He immediately protested, that's not fair. You're being unreasonable. I didn't answer. He knocked again, calling my name, but I just stared at the door, unmoving. Finally, I heard him walk away, his footsteps heavy and slow, fading down the hall. It was the sound of a man defeated, but not by me. 45 minutes later, Maya burst through the front door, her boyfriend, a mountain of a man with a booming voice, right behind her. She pushed past me and practically squeezed the air out of my lungs with a fierce hug. Her boyfriend stood awkwardly in the doorway until Maya waved him inside. This is my boyfriend, spelled with AC, and he played college football, she announced. He gave me a nod, and I instantly saw why she'd brought him. He was huge, taking up half the hallway just standing there. A silent, formidable presence. Maya, ever the protector, asked about my husband and his mother. I just pointed vaguely towards the living room, where we could already hear my mother-in-law's voice, growing louder and louder as she ranted on the phone. Maya grabbed my hand, practically dragged me back into the guest room, leaving her silent bodyguard in the hall. She shut the door, made me sit, and said, okay, now tell me everything again, from the beginning. This time, I didn't rush. I laid out every single indignity, every hurtful comment, every violation over the past 8 months. Her face darkened, growing angrier and angrier, until she was pacing back and forth like a caged lioness. You should have called me the first week, she fumed when she threw out your spices. I just looked at her, I kept thinking it would get better. She stopped pacing, looked me dead in the eye, and said, some things don't get better on their own, honey. And, through the closed door, We could still hear my mother-in-law's voice, booming through the house, telling whoever was on the other end that I was being completely unreasonable, trying to throw an old woman out on the street. Maya rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might just stick. "That woman," she muttered under her breath, "has some nerve." Suddenly, I felt utterly drained. I just flopped back onto the guest bed. Maya sat next to me. "Look, you can crash at my place tonight if you want to get out of here." I shook my head. "No. This is my house. I'm not leaving it." A slow smile spread across her face. "That's more like it," she said. She yelled through the door to her boyfriend that we were staying put and asked him to run home and grab her an overnight bag. I heard a "sure thing," and then the front door opened and closed. Maya kicked off her shoes, stretched out on the floor next to the bed. "I'm staying right here," she declared. "Your husband can just deal with it." I tried to thank her, but she just waved it off. "Shut up. That's what friends do." We lay there in the dark, my mother-in-law's relentless chatter still droning from the living room. Finally, around midnight, it stopped. Maya, bless her heart, was already asleep on the floor, tucked under the spare blanket I'd given her. I stared at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind, replaying the last 11 years. When had things gone so wrong? Had they always been this way and I just refused to see it? Every time I started to drift off, a creak, a rustle, would jerk me wide awake again. Morning came way too early, heralded by the smell of coffee and the clinking of pans from the kitchen. Maya sat up, stretched, and asked, "Ready to face them?" "No," I whispered, "but I have to." We walked down the hallway together, the sounds of my husband and his mother's voices growing louder. We rounded the corner into the kitchen, and there he was, standing at the stove, making eggs. And there she was, at my kitchen table, newspaper spread wide, reading like she owned the place. Neither of them even glanced my way. He kept his back to me, meticulously focused on his eggs. It was like I was invisible. Maya, bless her fearless heart, walked right past them both and started making coffee for us. "No, excuse me. No, may I?" I followed, poured myself a cup, my husband's back still stubbornly turned. The hot coffee scalded my throat with the first sip, but I welcomed the sharp pain. It gave me something to focus on, anything but the two people in my kitchen pretending I didn't exist. I set my mug down on the counter with a soft, deliberate click. And then I looked at his back, my voice clear and steady. "The eviction notice will arrive today." His shoulders stiffened. The spatula in his hand froze midair. "Your mother needs to start looking for a new place." The pan hit the stove with a clang so loud I thought it would crack. He spun around, his face already beet red. "Are you really going to destroy our family over this?" he boomed, louder than he intended. His mother's head snapped up from her newspaper, her eyes darting between us like she was watching a tennis match. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, calculating how to weaponize this moment. And then, the tears started. Before she even opened her mouth, I knew what was coming. "How could you do this to me?" Her voice, shaking, climbing higher with every word. "I have nowhere to go. I'm an old woman, and my own son is going to throw me out on the streets." She pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded practiced, fake. To my ears, at least. I just picked up my coffee mug, took another slow sip, and watched her performance unfold. My husband, as if pulled by an invisible string, immediately moved toward his mother, his hand reaching out to touch her shoulder. I stayed rooted to my spot. Didn't say a single word. The silence, the lack of my reaction, seemed to bother her more than any argument. Her crying grew louder, more dramatic. She peeked through her fingers, checking if I was reacting. When she saw my utterly calm, unreadable face, her sobs actually stuttered for a second. Just then, Maya's door opened down the hall. I heard her footsteps approaching, and she walked into the kitchen, looking delightfully disheveled in sweatpants and one of her boyfriend's oversized shirts, hair a beautiful mess. "Good morning, everyone." Her voice was entirely too cheerful for the dramatic scene she'd just stumbled into. I watched my mother-in-law's face twist with raw anger. Maya, unperturbed, went straight to the coffee maker, poured herself a cup like she'd lived here her whole life. Then, with a bright, entirely fake smile that didn't touch her eyes, she looked at my mother-in-law. "I'd be happy to help you start packing today, if you want. We could get boxes from the grocery store and start with your room." It was like someone had flipped a switch. The crying stopped instantly. My mother-in-law's hands dropped from her face, and she stared at Maya with a look that could have frozen water solid. My husband just looked confused, mouth slightly agape. Maya just kept smiling, sipping her coffee. In that moment, something tightened, then loosened, in my chest. I had to hide my own smile behind my mug. My husband grabbed my elbow, his voice quiet but urgent. "We need to talk." I let him pull me into the guest room, the one Maya had just vacated. He shut the door, then ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I knew well. He looked utterly exhausted, dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed until now. "Please," he pleaded, "reconsider this. My mother will find a place, but she needs more than 30 days. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, my resolve hardening. She's had 8 months to save money, to figure out her situation. But she didn't know she would need to. He shot back, his voice rising, pacing the small room. She thought this was permanent. And that, I said, my voice dangerously calm even though I wanted to scream, is exactly the problem. She moved in here, thinking she could take over my life, and you let her. He stopped pacing, eyes wide. "That's not fair," he mumbled. I held his gaze, unblinking. "What's not fair," I retorted, "is that I've been a stranger in my own home for 8 months, while you chose her comfort over my well-being every single time." He had no answer. The silence stretched between us until the sound of voices, growing louder, spilled from the kitchen. We walked back into the kitchen to find Maya still by the coffee maker, cool as a cucumber. My mother-in-law, though, had moved to the wall-mounted phone, dialing with sharp, angry jabs, not looking at either of us. "I'm calling your sister," she announced to my husband, her glare still fixed on me. "She needs to know what kind of woman you married." "Go ahead," I said, surprising even myself with my calm. I just sat down at the kitchen table, wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, and waited. That afternoon dragged on endlessly. My mother-in-law continued her relentless phone campaign, while my husband hovered, looking utterly lost, like a confused referee. Maya, my silent sentinel, stayed close, and every time my mother-in-law geared up for another crying fit, Maya would cheerfully offer to help her pack. Around 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My husband answered it, and a moment later, he walked back in, holding a large envelope with an official-looking seal. His face was white, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the return address. "A courier," he mumbled, his voice flat, holding the envelope like it might explode. My mother-in-law snatched it from his grasp, tearing it open. I watched her eyes scan the paper, her face rapidly morphing from ghost white to an enraged crimson. "You can't do this," she shrieked, so loud Maya actually flinched. "You can't just throw me out of my home." I stood up slowly, walked right up to her where she stood clutching the eviction notice. My voice was quiet, steady, unwavering. "I absolutely can do this. And if you're not out in 30 days, I'll have the sheriff remove you." The paper crumpled in her hands. She looked at my husband, desperate. "Are you going to let her do this to your own mother?" His face had gone gray, like he was about to be sick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I just turned and walked back to my coffee. The next few days blurred into a surreal, agonizing routine. My mother-in-law pulled out every single manipulative trick she'd ever used on her son. She cried dramatically at breakfast, raged at dinner. She clutched her chest, swearing she was having heart problems. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't bear the thought of being alone. It was an endless, exhausting performance. But this time, I wasn't just observing. I kept a detailed notebook in my nightstand. Date, time, what she said, what she did, how my husband responded. Maya, my incredible friend, helped me take pictures of her unpacked belongings, proof of her inaction, and even recorded videos of her most dramatic episodes when she thought no one was watching. We were building a case. After the second night, my husband moved to the couch. I'd see him from the hallway, lying there, staring blankly at the ceiling when I got up for the bathroom. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear him on the phone, his voice a low, guilty murmur. I knew it was his mother, even though she was just down the hall. When he did speak to me, it was always the same plea. Can't you give her more time? Don't you remember, for better or worse? What happened to the kind, patient woman I married? After the third day, I stopped responding. There was nothing left to say. Until one morning, he cornered me by the coffee maker with the same questions. That woman, I said, my voice hollow, she died. She died a little bit every single day for 8 months, while you consistently chose your mother over her. His mouth opened, then closed, no sound coming out. He looked at me like I was a complete stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe, after all this, we both were. By the end of the week, the neighbors started knocking. First, Mrs. Chin, who always waved when I got the mail. Then, Mr. Rodriguez from across the street. Both looked terribly uncomfortable, standing in my entryway, my mother-in-law glaring from the living room, arms crossed. I pulled out my phone and started showing them the photos Maya and I had painstakingly collected. Here's my kitchen before she moved in. Swipe. And here's what it looks like now. Mrs. Chen's eyes went wide. I showed them pictures of my bedroom, her belongings strewn across my dresser, my nightstand. I explained how she just started using my room during the day, no asking. Mr. Rodriguez shifted his weight, looking at the floor. I recounted coming home to dinner set for 2, being told there was no food for me. How my clothes festered in the washer while she only touched my husband's. Both neighbors glanced nervously towards the living room, where she sat, stone-faced. Mrs. Chin gently touched my arm. I'm so sorry, she whispered, for believing what we were told. Mr. Rodriguez nodded. I should have come to you first. They left quickly, whispering to each other on the sidewalk, the truth finally dawning on them. An hour later, Maya showed up again, this time with a hardware store bag. She pulled out a new lock set and a drill. We're securing your bedroom, she declared. Right now. We went upstairs, and she immediately got to work, unscrewing the old doorknob while I held the door steady. My mother-in-law appeared on the stairs, watching us, her mouth a thin, angry line. Maya didn't even glance at her as she expertly installed the new lock, one that could only be opened with a key from the outside. She handed me both keys. Keep one with you, she said firmly, at all times. My husband came home just as we were testing the lock. He stood at the top of the stairs, staring at the gleaming new hardware on my bedroom door. His face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just turned around and went back downstairs, defeated, silent. 7 days after I'd given my mother-in-law the eviction notice, I still saw the exact same scene every morning, every evening, when I walked past her room. A chaotic mess of clothes, papers, random junk, spread across every surface. Not a single box. Not one piece of furniture moved or prepped for transport. Her closet still bulged, her dresser drawers still hung open, overflowing. On day 7, I stood in her doorway and watched her, casually reading a magazine on her bed, as if she had all the time in the world. She glanced up, that sickly sweet smile on her face, and my stomach churned. She thought I was bluffing. She truly believed I'd back down at the last minute, just like I always had before. She thought I'd let her stay. The very next morning, I called a moving company. I scheduled them for day 30. The woman on the phone asked what needed to be moved. Everything in one bedroom, I told her, plus anything in common areas that belongs to my mother-in-law. She asked if the items would be packed. If they're not packed when your movers arrive, I said, my voice steady, then your movers can pack them and send me the bill. I gave her my credit card, confirmed the date and time. Then I walked straight to my mother-in-law's room. The movers are coming in 3 weeks, I announced. Anything not packed by then will be packed for you and put into storage at your expense. Her face drained of all color. She shot up from the bed so fast the magazine fell to the floor. She started to say something, but I turned and walked away before she could even get the words out. My husband came home that evening and went straight to his mother's room. I heard their hushed voices for almost an hour behind the closed door. When he finally emerged, he walked into the kitchen where I was making dinner. He sounded tired, genuinely confused, as he asked his mother, Why haven't you started looking for apartments? I kept chopping vegetables, not turning around. A moment later, I heard her descend the stairs, walking into the kitchen behind me. And she said it. To my husband. I shouldn't have to look for places. This is my home now, too. The knife in my hand stopped. I set it down carefully on the cutting board, then turned around slowly to face both of them. Something shifted in my husband's face right then. His eyes went wide, his mouth slightly agape, like a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. He looked at his mother, then at me, then back at his mother again. I watched the dawning realization spread across his features as he finally saw what had been blindingly obvious to everyone else for months. His mother never, ever planned to leave. She'd moved in with the full intention of staying forever, of pushing me out of my own house. The look on his face told me he was seeing his mother clearly, perhaps for the very first time in his life. My husband looked at his mother, his voice flat, hard, a tone I'd never heard from him before. Have you even tried to find an apartment? She lifted her chin, defiant. I don't need to find a place. My son wouldn't really let you throw me out. The words hung in the air, thick with her unwavering entitlement. She truly believed, with absolute certainty, that he would choose her over me. She'd been counting on it this whole time. My husband sank into a chair at the kitchen table, burying his head in his hands. His shoulders slumped forward. He looked smaller. I watched him sit there for a long moment, then slowly turn back to my vegetables, continuing to make dinner. This, I realized, was his battle now. Something he had to work through on his own. I couldn't do it for him. I wouldn't try. He had to decide for himself what kind of man he wanted to be, what kind of marriage he wanted to have. I finished dinner, then left the kitchen, went upstairs to my bedroom, and locked the door behind me. Later that night, around 11, I heard a soft knock on the door. My husband's voice, tentative, "Can we talk?" I got up from where I'd been reading, unlocked the door. He walked in, sat heavily on the edge of the bed, looking utterly drained, more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. His hair was a mess, like he'd been tearing at it, and the dark circles under his eyes were deeper than ever. He just sat there for a long minute, silent, and I waited. Finally, he spoke. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. His voice cracked. He told me he'd kept telling himself his mother just needed time to adjust, that she'd calm down, act normal once she settled. I sat down next to him, but not too close. Did you honestly not see how she treated me? He was quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. He looked down at his hands, then nodded slowly. I saw everything, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But I didn't want to deal with her reaction. It was easier to pretend things weren't as bad as they were. He swallowed hard. I chose the path that wouldn't cause me problems. And you paid the price for my cowardice. The word cowardice hung in the air, broken. I just sat there, watching him, his eyes fixed on the floor. A tiny part of me, the old me, wanted to reach out, to comfort him. But a much larger part, the part that had endured 8 months of being treated like garbage in my own home, was still blazing with anger. I took a deep breath. I appreciate the honesty, I told him, but I need to see action now, not just words. Your mother still needs to leave, and you need to be the one to make sure she actually does it. He looked up at me confused. What do you mean? I'm not going to be the bad guy anymore, I clarified. You need to sit her down and tell her to start looking for apartments. He swallowed hard, then nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. We sat in silence for a few more minutes before he finally got up and left the room. A turning point, I hoped. The next morning, I woke up to voices downstairs. I came down to find my husband sitting at the kitchen table, directly across from his mother. She was sipping her coffee, casually scrolling on her phone, as if nothing in the world was wrong. My husband cleared his throat, took a deep breath. "Mom," he began, his voice shaking a little, but the words came out, "You need to start apartment hunting today." She looked up from her phone, a picture of confused innocence. She set her phone down, and her eyes immediately started to water. "Oh, here we go. The crying routine. I don't understand," she wailed, "why everyone is being so cruel to me. I thought this was my home now." Where else could I possibly go? Tears began to roll down her cheeks as she reached across the table to grab his hand, pulling him back into her web. I stood in the doorway, a silent observer, watching, waiting to see what he would do. He pulled his hand back gently, his voice now stronger, firmer. Mom, the crying isn't going to work this time. You have 3 weeks to find a place. That is final. Her face transformed. The tears stopped, just like that, as if someone had flipped a switch. Her mouth tightened into a hard line, her eyes went cold. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. You are a disappointment, she spat, a terrible son for choosing a woman over your own mother. I raised you better than this. I can't believe you'd throw me out on the streets. Her voice escalated with each accusation. My husband flinched, visibly, when she called him a disappointment. But he didn't back down. You did this to yourself, Mom, he said, his voice strained, by refusing to respect boundaries. She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Boundaries, she sneered. That's just an excuse for you to abandon me. I watched him grip the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white, but he stayed put. Then, she played her final, cruel card. If I leave, she threatened, her voice going cold and flat, utterly devoid of emotion, I will never speak to you again. You will be dead to me. She meant it. I saw my husband's face crumble, a flicker of genuine pain in his eyes. He loved his mother, despite everything, and the thought of losing her completely, of being dead to her, was tearing him apart. But then, beneath the pain, I saw something else. A flicker of resolve slowly building. He sat there, just breathing, for what felt like an eternity, his mother staring him down, waiting for him to cave. Finally, he spoke. That, he told her, his voice unwavering this time, is your choice to make. But you are leaving in 3 weeks, whether you want to or not. Her face went scarlet. She snatched her phone off the table, stormed past me without a glance, and went upstairs. A few seconds later, her bedroom door slammed so hard the entire house rattled. My husband just sat at the table, his head in his hands. I walked over, sat down next to him. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there, side by side, as the morning light streamed through the kitchen window. After a while, he got up to take a shower. Later that day, I heard him on the phone, looking up apartment listings, calling about availability. He was actually doing it. Over the next week, I watched him. He actually helped his mother look for apartments. He'd come home from work, showing her listings he'd found. He drove her to places, even as she complained relentlessly about every single one. Too small, too far, too expensive. But this time, I saw him setting boundaries. Real boundaries. When she tried to guilt-trip him, he'd take a visible breath, then calmly repeat, Mom, you need to find a place. When she claimed she was too tired to look, he'd tell her, you need to make time. She fought him every step of the way, but he wasn't caving anymore. He was holding firm. My mother-in-law, in a final desperate act of manipulation, started calling all my husband's relatives. She told them I was abusing her, forcing her out of her home, that I was cruel and heartless, and she had nowhere to go. 2 days later, his aunt called. I was in the living room when his phone rang, and I heard him answer. His aunt started screaming so loud I could hear her voice clear as day from across the room. She told him he should be ashamed for letting his wife treat his mother this way. My husband just let her yell for a full minute. Then, he started to explain. The kitchen, the meals, the laundry, her in our bed. He laid out 8 months of his mother systematically trying to push me out of my own home. The yelling stopped. His aunt went dead silent. Then, she said something that made my husband's eyes go wide with shock. She told him she'd heard stories about his mother doing exactly this to other family members over the years. His mother had moved in with a cousin, tried the same tactics until the cousin's husband put his foot down. Another relative had to get a lawyer involved to get her to leave. He looked utterly stunned, like this information was completely new to him. Why did no one ever tell me this? He asked his aunt, bewildered. She explained that the family kept quiet because his mother would throw a fit and cut anyone off who dared to bring it up. She had a pattern, a history, of moving in with relatives and systematically trying to take over their homes. My husband thanked his aunt, hung up, then just sat on the couch, staring into space for a long, long time. The truth, finally, was unavoidable. With only 2 weeks left before the deadline, my mother-in-law finally signed a lease. A small apartment, across town. My husband came home and told me, exhausted but visibly relieved, she found a place. Put down a deposit. She was, of course, absolutely furious about it. She made sure everyone knew she was being forced into this horrible situation. She told the neighbors she was being thrown out by her ungrateful son and his terrible wife. She called relatives, sobbing about how alone she'd be in her tiny apartment. She even took to social media, posting dramatic updates about how family doesn't matter anymore and how children abandon their parents. But it didn't matter. The lease was signed. The move date was set. My husband looked at me, a deep sigh escaping him. I never realized how much she manipulated me, he confessed, until I actually started pushing back. I know, I said softly. I'm glad you finally see it. The week before moving day, I barely slept. My husband, too, was on edge, checking his phone every few minutes. I knew his mother was texting him nonstop, desperate, trying to change his mind. He'd read them, then deliberately place the phone face down, no response. I saw the stress etched on his face, but he held firm. He didn't cave. One night, he turned to me, his voice serious. We need to talk about our marriage, he said. Her leaving isn't going to fix everything that broke between us over the past 8 months. I nodded, because he was absolutely right. It wouldn't. We found a counselor specializing in family issues and booked our first session for the week after his mother was gone. The counselor's office was in a cozy downtown building, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, trying to make you feel calm. My husband sat on one side of the couch, I on the other, a small but significant space between us. The counselor asked why we were there, and for the first time, he spoke openly, honestly. He told her about his mother moving in, how he hadn't asked me first. He detailed all the ways she'd taken over our home, how he'd constantly told me to let it go. The counselor listened, patiently, then asked him, "Why did you think it was okay to prioritize your mother over your wife?" He went silent. A long, heavy silence. He finally explained that he'd grown up believing his most important job was to take care of his mother. His father left when he was young. She raised him alone, constantly telling him he was the man of the house now. She'd instilled in him this profound responsibility for her happiness, her well-being, and he'd carried that, unquestioning, into adulthood. The counselor asked if he realized his wife should be his priority now. He nodded. I'm starting to understand, he admitted, but it feels wrong to put my mother second. The counselor gently explained that healthy boundaries with parents aren't just good, they're essential for a marriage to thrive. His mother was an adult. She was responsible for her own life, her own emotions. He wasn't her keeper. He looked like someone had just explained something blindingly obvious that he, somehow, had never, ever seen before. In our second session, the counselor turned to me, asking what I needed from my husband moving forward. I told her I needed consistent, long-term change, not just a temporary fix until the crisis blew over. I needed him to prove he could set boundaries with his mother and actually keep them, even when she cried, even when she guilt-tripped him. I needed him to choose our marriage over his mother's feelings every single time. My husband looked at me, a new understanding in his eyes. He said he understood. He wanted to rebuild my trust, knew it would take time, and was willing to do the excruciating work. The counselor gave us homework, communication exercises, setting expectations, and we left that session feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. Moving day. A crisp Saturday morning in early fall. The movers arrived at 8 a.m., truck rumbling down the street. My mother-in-law answered the door in her bathrobe, looking utterly indignant, like they were the most unwanted guests. There must be some mistake, she declared. I'm not going anywhere. The head mover, a patient giant, just pulled out his paperwork, showing our address, her name. My husband came downstairs. Start with the guest room, he told the movers, his voice steady. She stood in the hallway, watching them carry out her boxes and furniture, her face a mask of complete disbelief. She truly thought this day would never come. She kept looking at my husband, waiting for him to intervene, to stop it all. But he just kept directing the movers, carefully avoiding her eyes. He was doing it. When they started loading her bed frame onto the truck, the reality finally hit her. This was happening. She followed my husband outside to the driveway, and I watched from the living room window. She grabbed his arm, fresh tears streaming, telling him she'd be all alone in that tiny apartment. She cried about being his mother, raising him, sacrificing everything, and this was how he repaid her. My husband gently pulled his arm away, then hugged her briefly. But when she pulled back, looking up at him expectantly, hopefully, he spoke. Firmly. "Mom, you did this to yourself by refusing to respect boundaries." He explained, "You had 8 months to treat my wife with basic decency, and you chose not to. You could have stayed if you had just been kind to her. Instead, you tried to push her out of her own home." Her face, in seconds, morphed from tearful sadness to pure rage. She stepped back from him. "You are weak," she spat. Controlled by her. "She stole my son from me, turned him against his own mother." My husband started to respond, but I opened the front door and walked outside. I stood right next to my husband and looked my mother-in-law directly in the eye. She stared back, pure hatred blazing. "You stole my son," she hissed. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The movers finished loading the truck. My mother-in-law got into my husband's car, and he followed them to her new apartment. I stayed home. I watched them drive away, and the house felt different immediately. Lighter. Like I could finally, truly breathe again. I walked through each room, noticing the quiet, the emptiness where her suffocating presence used to fill every corner. That night, after my husband came back, exhausted, from helping her unpack, we sat in our living room. For the first time in 8 months, she wasn't there. The tension, that constant, oppressive weight, slowly drained from the air. I felt my shoulders drop, finally relaxing. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. We just spent that entire weekend reclaiming our space. I put my kitchen back exactly how I liked it, my spices back in their proper place. We moved furniture, rehung photos she'd taken down, put away the decorations she'd replaced with her own. It felt like breaking the surface after being held underwater for far too long. Pure, unadulterated relief. Sunday night, my husband sat me down. He apologized. Not a flimsy, "I'm sorry," but a deep, genuine apology, more heartfelt than anything he'd ever said. He listed specific ways he'd failed me, acknowledging every single time he'd chosen his mother's comfort over my well-being. He promised to do better, to prove it with actions, not just words. I looked at him, my heart aching but also hopeful. "I want to believe you," I told him, "but I need to see sustained change." And so, we started therapy every week, slowly, painstakingly, working to rebuild what was broken. My husband, armed with new understanding, learned to set boundaries with his mother. When she called crying, when she showed up unannounced, he held firm. She, in turn, slowly learned that her old tactics, threatening to cut him off, making him feel guilty, simply wouldn't work anymore. For the first 2 weeks after she moved out, my mother-in-law called my husband's phone every single day. At all hours. I'd hear it ring and watch him decline most of them. When he did answer, the conversations were short, hushed. She'd cry, beg him to visit, complain about her apartment, or ask when she could come home. My husband, firmly, told her she could call once a week, on Sundays. And he wouldn't discuss me or our marriage with her anymore. She screamed at him so loud through the phone, I could hear her from across the room, calling him ungrateful, saying I'd poisoned his mind. He just held the phone away from his ear until she finished, then calmly repeated his once-a-week boundary before hanging up. The next Sunday, she tried a different approach. Sweet, concerned. "How are you doing, honey? Are you eating properly? Sleeping well without me there?" He answered briefly, and the moment she started asking about me, he cut her off. "Mom, that topic is off limits." She got angry again, claiming her right to know what was happening in her son's life. He didn't waver. You gave up that right, he told her, when you refused to respect your wife and your marriage. The Sunday calls continued, but he stuck to his boundaries, through tears, through rage, through guilt trips. Watching him handle each call with growing firmness, something profound shifted inside me. 3 months passed. The house felt completely different. I could walk into any room without finding her there, without hearing her voice criticizing something I'd done. My kitchen was my kitchen again, spices in their rightful places. My bedroom was mine, my sanctuary. I could leave my things wherever I wanted without someone moving them or complaining. I started sleeping again deeply because the constant tension, the waiting for the next confrontation, the next manipulation, was gone. Coming home from work, I felt actual relief, not dread. The silence in the house was peaceful, not hostile. I could finally relax on my own couch, without someone glaring or making pointed comments. My husband and I ate dinner together at our own table, talking about our days, without his mother inserting herself into every conversation. We watched TV in the evenings without being told it was too loud or the wrong channel. One night, sitting in the living room, it hit me. I felt comfortable in my own home again. For the first time in 8 months. The constant, crushing weight on my chest had finally lifted. I could breathe normally again. October arrived, and with it, my mother-in-law's call, demanding to know our Thanksgiving plans. She just announced she was coming to our house, like she always did, and wanted to know when dinner would be served. My husband took a deep breath, then told her, calmly but firmly, "We're spending Thanksgiving alone this year, Mom. Just us as a couple." She laughed. A dismissive, "You must be joking," laugh. "Of course, I'm coming. That's what families do." He repeated it, gently but resolutely, that we needed this time to focus on our marriage, and she wasn't invited this year. The line went silent for several seconds, then the crying started. "How could you exclude your own mother from a family holiday? I'll be all alone. No one to cook for me, no one to spend time with." My husband remained calm, suggested she could have dinner with his aunt or join a community meal at her church. Instantly, she switched from crying to furious yelling, accusing me, "Of course, she's making you do this. You're choosing her over your own mother on a holiday." He just looked at me, then back into the phone. "Mom, I'm making my own choices, and these are the right choices for my marriage." She hung up on him. He didn't call her back. When Thanksgiving finally arrived, we cooked a small, intimate meal together. We ate at our dining room table, just the two of us, candles flickering. It felt like the first real holiday we'd shared in years, a quiet, peaceful celebration. I started noticing the small, consistent things my husband did that proved he truly meant what he said about changing. When his mother called and tried to pry about me or our relationship, he immediately, decisively, shut down the conversation. No more indulging her curiosity. When she sent him endless text messages complaining about her apartment, about her loneliness, he responded with practical, measured suggestions, never rushing over to fix everything like before. When she tried to invite herself over for this or that reason, he said no clearly, without wavering, even when she pushed back hard. I watched him maintain these boundaries, week after agonizing week, even when she cried real tears, even when she sent him long, heartbreaking messages about how hurt she was. He stopped making excuses for her behavior. He started acknowledging, out loud, when she was clearly trying to manipulate him. One Sunday, after a particularly draining phone call where she'd sobbed uncontrollably about being abandoned, he sat down next to me, a profound look on his face. "I finally understand," he said, his voice quiet. "I finally get what you were dealing with all those months." Watching her try to control me from a distance, it made me realize how much worse it must have been for you when she lived here. I didn't say anything, but something inside me, something that had been hardened and brittle for so long, slowly, tentatively, began to soften towards him. Our anniversary came in early December. We decided to celebrate quietly at home, just us. My husband cooked dinner while I set the table with our best china, lit candles, making our living room feel warm and intimate again. We ate slowly, talking about the past year, how close we'd come to losing everything. After dinner, he pulled out a small, wrapped box, handing it to me with visibly nervous hands. I opened it to find a delicate gold necklace, 2 initials intertwined. He fastened it around my neck, his fingers brushing my skin. "I want you to have something," he said, "that represents both of us, together, as equal partners." He looked at me earnest. "I know I have a long, long way to go to earn back your complete trust. But I want to renew our vows someday, when I've truly proven myself worthy of that." I touched the necklace, and for the first time in months, tears welled in my eyes that weren't from anger or pain, but something new. Hope. We sat together on the couch, and he gently took my hand, holding it like he was afraid I might pull away. I didn't pull away. My mother-in-law eventually, finally, stopped trying to force her way back into our daily lives. The Sunday phone calls continued, but she stopped using them to complain about me or demand special treatment. She accepted that my husband wouldn't discuss our marriage with her and stopped her invasive questions. She still wasn't happy, of course. She'd make occasional comments about how things used to be, but she learned crying and manipulation wouldn't change his mind anymore. My husband even told me she'd started attending activities at her apartment building, seemed less fixated on controlling his life. She joined a book club, a knitting group, complained less about being lonely. The change wasn't dramatic, it wasn't sudden, but over time, she slowly stopped fighting the boundaries and, remarkably, started living her own life. My husband maintained his once-a-week phone call schedule and visited her once a month. But he never stayed longer than an hour, and he always told me beforehand. 6 months after moving day, he came home from visiting his mother with a genuinely surprised look on his face. "She actually seems okay," he said. "Living on her own." She'd made friends with other women in her building. They went to lunch. She'd decorated her apartment with photos and plants, seemed genuinely proud of her small space. She was even taking a watercolor painting class at the community center, showing him pieces she'd completed. He said she seemed more independent, more engaged with life than she had been in years. I felt this immense wave of relief wash over me. A part of me had always worried she'd never adjust, that she'd find a way to make us miserable forever. But knowing she was building her own life, separate from ours, finally allowed me to truly relax. He even said she asked him fewer questions about what we were doing and spent more time talking about her activities and her friends. Then, in late spring, my husband surprised me. Plane tickets. A weekend trip to the coast. We hadn't taken a real vacation, just the 2 of us, in over 3 years. Something always came up, or his mother needed something. We flew out on a Friday morning, and for 3 blissful days, we walked on the beach, ate at tiny, charming restaurants, and slept in, undisturbed. We laughed about silly things, held hands watching the sunset, reminisced about when we first started dating. It felt like meeting each other again after a long, painful separation. We didn't talk about his mother. We didn't talk about the past year or all the hurt we'd endured. We just existed together in the moment, remembering why we had fallen in love in the first place. On the last night of that trip, we sat on our hotel balcony, the ocean breeze soft against our faces. My husband turned to me, his voice raw with emotion. He thanked me for not giving up on us, even when he'd given me every single reason to leave. He said the trip felt like a fresh start, that he wanted to keep building on what we were creating together. And that's when it truly hit me. Sometime during that trip, I realized I was genuinely, profoundly happy again. Not just relieved, not just less stressed, but truly, deeply happy, in a way I hadn't been in over a year. Standing up for myself, refusing to be a stranger in my own home, had saved both my house and my marriage. If I had backed down, if I had compromised, if I had kept trying to make peace, she would still be living with us, and I would still be utterly miserable. On the plane ride home, my husband looked at me, a profound gratitude in his eyes. He said he was grateful I had been strong enough to force the change he couldn't make himself. He'd been so terrified of conflict with his mother that he'd allowed her to destroy our marriage, piece by agonizing piece. He told me that watching me stand firm in my boundaries had shown him what real strength looked like, and he was trying to learn from my example. A few nights after we got back, sitting in our living room, we talked about the future. For the first time in months, we talked about our future. He said he wanted to start fresh, with better communication, real partnership, no more decisions made without me. We talked about maybe trying for a baby in the next year or two, if therapy continued to help us grow. Another trip in the fall. Visiting my family for the holidays this year. He promised he would never, ever let anyone, not even his own mother, come between us again. He understood now, truly understood, that being a good husband meant choosing his wife first, above all else, and setting firm boundaries with everyone else. I told him I was willing to keep working on us, to rebuild, but it hinged on him maintaining these changes, consistently, never slipping back into those old, damaging patterns. He agreed, acknowledging that trust, once shattered, had to be meticulously earned back, through consistent action, day after day over time. And as we made plans together, as equal partners, for the first time in our marriage, it didn't just feel right. It felt like salvation. About a month after our trip, I invited Maya over for dinner on a Friday night. She walked in, bottle of wine in hand, and immediately stopped in the entryway, looking around, sensing it. "The house feels completely different," she said, her voice soft. Like the air itself has changed. I knew exactly what she meant. I felt it every time I came home. The suffocating tension that used to hang over every room was gone. The space felt light, peaceful, in a way it hadn't since before my mother-in-law moved in. Maya hugged me tight in the kitchen. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, "for standing your ground when it mattered most. Most people would have backed down, tried to keep the peace. But you were willing to lose everything to save what was truly important." My husband walked in from the living room, where he'd been setting the table. Maya turned, her gaze direct. He stood there, looking a bit uncomfortable, then walked over to her. "Thank you, Maya," he said, his voice sincere, "for being there for her when things were at their worst. I know I let the situation get out of control, and I'm truly sorry for putting her through all of that." Maya studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I accept your apology," she said, "but you better never let anything like that happen again. She deserves better than what she was living with." He agreed, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "I know," he said. "I understand that now in a way I didn't before." We sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed easily, naturally, between the three of us. Maya told funny stories about her new job. My husband talked about a case he was working on, and I felt myself finally, completely, relaxing into the evening. After Maya left, I stood in the kitchen, washing dishes, looking around at the space that was truly, undeniably mine again. My husband came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, and I leaned back into his embrace. The journey to get here had been incredibly painful. There were so many moments I honestly thought our marriage wouldn't survive. But we had come through it. Stronger. More honest. We were making plans now, together, as real partners, instead of him making decisions without me. We talked about maybe trying for a baby next year, if therapy continued to help us grow. We discussed a longer vacation in the fall, spending the holidays with my family this time. For the first time in almost a year, I felt genuinely excited about our future, instead of just surviving each day. Looking back, I realized that being willing to walk away, to risk everything, had been the only thing that could have saved us. If I had kept compromising, kept accepting less than I deserved, we would have stayed trapped in that terrible, toxic pattern forever. So, that's my story. It's been a long, hard road, but we're still walking it, stronger than ever. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to fight so hard for your own home, for your own marriage? What would you have done in my place when he told you to just let it go? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspective.